Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Docs Online panel. Thank you so much for joining us. A special thanks to any UK-based delegates that are joining us, seeing it is very much pub garden weather right now and not sit inside watching a panel weather right now. So really appreciate that you could be here with us this evening. I've got a number of representatives here from some really interesting documentary platforms who I'm going to introduce you to in a moment. Just to start with, a little bit of info about why this panel is going ahead, who I am, and other things. My name's Delphi. By day, I'm a box office analyst, but I also have various freelance hustles. One of those was working with DocFest this year to help them select films for the meat market. Also, an avid documentary fan, and an advocate for kind of broader diversity in the film industry, which kind of ties into some of the stuff we're talking about today. And this session, kind of the point of it, was just to explore and highlight different documentary platforms online and what they're providing. Obviously, there's a number of kind of big players that are showcasing documentary and broadcasters, streaming companies, and documentaries have been doing very well theatrically as well. But outside of that space, what spaces exist for work that's maybe a little bit more niche in terms of its audience, and yeah, what spaces exist for work that doesn't get picked up, for big, mainstream audience viewing. For kind of, for those who are fans of documentaries, hopefully this will just give you some inspiration of new places you can go and watch films and documentary content. And for filmmakers, hopefully this will give you an idea of kind of different places that you might be able to share the films you make with. Like I said, there's quite a number of platforms that are with us today. And beyond that, there's a whole number of platforms who aren't with us today. So to name check a few more, there's Tenk, which is TENK, Another Screen, who are run by a company called by Another Gaze, and of course the Criterion channel, which I'm sure many of you have come across as well, and probably numerous others that I don't have on my list here. But yeah, really great to be kind of exploring these with you. Just to flag, we have a chat box in here. We're going to have time for questions from the audience at the end of the session. So kind of the last 10 minutes or so will be, I'll be passing audience questions on to our panelists. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box and they'll be passed on to us. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to be quiet and shine some light on our panelists, who are kind of the main important part of this session. So Chris, do you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and talk a bit about your platform, True Story?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm based in London. I have been a cinema programmer and still am a cinema programmer for the last sort of 13, 14 years. And part of the inspiration for starting True Story, which is something I've been thinking about for a couple of years, is part of my programming work has been showing documentaries in cinemas. But I was just very conscious going to a lot of the festivals that I attend, that a lot of the films that I really love at documentary film festivals aren't necessarily the films that get distribution in the UK. They're not necessarily the films that I'm able to book and play within the cinemas that I program. So it just sort of came about from that, really. I just kind of felt like there was, I could create a space that could perhaps be a place to bring audiences together for these films. So I launched technically it was live in the middle of October last year, but I got COVID the day after I launched, so I didn't actually do anything until November. So we actually sort of started working on it in earnest in November. We're pretty broad in terms of the films that we have on the platform. I'd say we've probably got about 150 films at the moment, and we're adding more all the time. but probably sort of a large proportion of those tends more towards the kind of the creative non-fiction type filmmaking. But we're sort of open to all kinds of films. Really, we sort of take everything on on its merits. So there's, perhaps some, we have a few kind of more perhaps conventional talking head documentaries as well. Some perhaps sort of mainstream documentaries, as it were. So lots of short films as well. We already had quite a lot of short films, and we started having kind of curated short film sections too. We're a subscription platform. We are available everywhere except for China and Indonesia, because we run on Vimeo technology, and unfortunately Vimeo is banned in China and Indonesia, so it's not by choice. And we are currently, I mean, you can subscribe in, I think it's about 120 currencies at the moment. So I mean, it's very early days. We're just sort of, trying to expand our audience. I mean, about 60% of our audience is in the UK, another 20% in North America, and then the rest in about 20 to 30 different countries. So sort of little pockets here and there. So yeah, so we're like 6-7 months in. We're just sort of very much at the beginning of trying to establish ourselves.
That's great. Thanks so much, Chris. And then if we move on to Lukas from e-flux.
Hi everyone. Thank you again, Delphi and the festival, for having me and inviting me to represent e-flux programming in regard to nonfiction. I think that's a great discussion we're having here, because the time is basically right now to discuss that when so many online programs are so many programs moved online. So but I feel that like what e-flux is doing is a little specific here. First of all, because of special topos, and many of you know that e-flux itself, online platform, e-flux.com, exists already for more than like all 20 years, and it's a platform to reflect critical discourse surrounding mainly contemporary art and related cultures. So there are a lot of different sections covered on the platform, including architecture, literature, education, in regard to contemporary art world. The journal in itself is an important part of the platform. So e-flux publishes a journal called e-flux Journal since 2008, and it has commissioned and published many important theoretical and historical texts from then. And comparably recently, e-flux started to program and curate a video and film section, which I am an associate curator of, and it's the section which I actually shared the link with the moderator of the discussion. So I think it would be great if you could look at the website itself, because it has a few different rubrics, and I want to very briefly present each of them, because all of the rubrics, all of the things or activities that are happening on video and film on e-flux right now deal with nonfiction, not necessary, but also with nonfiction media and film. So if you go to the website, you would see that the first, in the middle of the video and the middle row, the middle column presents the series, what we call a screening series, and the first series is called Artist Cinemas. And basically, it's an online weekly series of film programs that are curated by the artists or filmmakers invited specifically by e-flux. And here we had a few goals in mind. First of all, that it's kind of interesting to make the artist do the curatorial decisions. And on the one hand, it's kind of going against the grain. It's sort of sometimes not really conforming to the textbook knowledge of what moving image art is, or it sort of does not follow sometimes the academic or historical canons, because the artists are themselves makers and they have their own preferences, their own influences, or their own friendship connections that they want to expose. And still, there is a conceptual part to it. So every artist selection also is followed by the interview every week. So either art historian or film critic would interview that filmmaker, the main curator artist selected. And we are really interested in kind of this approach of filmmakers programming other filmmakers, and we think it's playful but also important in terms of archiving that input. And probably a good example is recent artist Cao Fei, a very known contemporary artist from China, who also made many films, including some non-fiction films, dealing with the changes in the 90s and 2000s in the culture and the attitudes of in the Chinese society. We invited her to curate that section, and she selected very young emerging Chinese artists that are just basically making very fresh new films right now, and she knows them the best. And then she also selected someone to interview them. So another section which is more related probably even to the Doc Fest, to the Sheffield Doc Fest, is Festival Forums, a very new series on e-flux video and film. And here we really want to establish collaborations with ongoing festivals, asking them, inviting them to present their own festivals on e-flux. So far we had 2 collaborations with Images Festival, a very recent one, and Oberhausen. And we think it's also very interesting kind of attempt to bridge this 2 different institutional fields like cinema and contemporary art by asking festivals to present themselves for basically the community of contemporary art that is following mainly e-flux website. And probably I should say, for some of you might be not so clear that e-flux itself, the platform, is followed by many like hundreds of thousands of people from different contemporary art institutions, as well as contemporary art lovers, contemporary art followers from all the continents, and we have 47% of visitors from Europe, 42% from North America, and the 11% from Asia, and then there's like a scattered percentages from the rest of the continents. And so definitely there is an interest in cinema and film and in documentary forms, but it's coming more from the audiences of the contemporary art, and that was probably one of the main kind of motivations for us to really work on video and film section, because we feel that definitely there are a lot of connections between interest in moving image in contemporary art world and sometimes in the cinema world. These 2 worlds do not bridge so well. Specifically during the pandemic, we thought that the online platform could really make the step and try to connect these 2 worlds in many different ways. So I mentioned two different programs. The third program is the most sort of subjective curatorial program called Staff Picks. Basically, it's the curators working in the e-flux, me included, who are picking one film or like a few films to be streamed for the entire month. And the idea is that like we for ourselves compare it to kind of like in all times going to the video rental store and just finding something. So in this StuffPix program, we really do kind of unusual or sometimes even pretty brave decisions, picking up something from the history of moving image art that's not necessarily trending in the festivals or galleries and museums at this point. So it's sometimes some kind of very curatorial e-flux section. And the fourth section is basically not a section, but the thing that we are doing is guest curated programs. The good example would be a few programs I curated before I became an associate curator for the entire video and film section. These programs usually are long programs and conceptually kind of heavy, so we want to the curator to present the idea and the concept of usually 3 months long screening series. So for instance, one of the programs I curated was called True Fake, and in relation to documentary, it resonates very well because in this program I was thinking about the films and video art and documentary films that are sort of erasing the boundaries between fiction and reality with a very intentionally with certain either political or aesthetic attitudes. And there were like 6 different sections from computer animation to hybrid documentaries dealing with different sorts of questions, but what united all of them was impossibility of straightly say is it like a documentary or a fiction. And at some point the question of this division was also like this division itself was questioned. So these are many programs that we also envision in the future, inviting other curators to do. And the last one I want to present, which might be interested as well for the filmmakers who joined us today, is film premieres on e-flux. And it's also just something that we are testing right now. And very recently we had the first online premiere on our website. It was Sierra Petengil's new documentary called The Rifleman about the National Rifleman Association in the US. It's a critical political film based on archival research the filmmaker did, as well as things like people she interviewed, and the film was streaming for 1 week alongside with the written Q&A with the film scholar Christian Rossipal, who specifically is interested in the question of connection between military politics and film and media. So we also what we actually did, we collaborated with a studio that produced the film, and we connected the film scholar with the filmmaker. They made an interview, then we promoted the premiere, and eventually at some point we launched the premiere with the interview, and it was streamed globally for a week. Everyone, including the filmmaker, the studio, and us, were very happy with the results because the outreach was very wide, and that's something we really thinking about exploring and elaborating in the future. So the last thing I should probably say, because Delphi asked also us to think about the ambitions in the future, and how do we envision the platform growing. In terms of e-flux, it's I would say it's not a it's not a baby platform. It's definitely a platform that already has its huge audience, and it's really, established platform among contemporary art people, professionals, and just visitors. But in terms of video and film, we really have certain ambitions, and we would like really to make cinema and contemporary art collaborate even more, including, specifically in terms of nonfiction, the form that is so often employed in the works of contemporary artists, not only like cinema filmmakers, and we sort of think that on the one hand, the close connections between festivals, production houses, and experimental film, documentary film community, they could be really stronger, and I think by making this dialogue happening on the online platform, we hope to achieve that. But also we want the filmmakers, the nonfiction filmmakers, being more visible to contemporary art world, and in the long term, maybe establishing even institutional relations with galleries, museums, and institutions that are already the audience of e-flux, and basically we will do that by following the same path. So generating, the content internally, programming things as we do now, and also asking curators from outside to guest curate for us. But also we're thinking about continuing, collaborations with the filmmakers and artists themselves, and their distribution companies or production studios, and the sort of umbrella thing which we also planning to make continue as the discursive content. So we want to discuss about what's happening in the moving image art world. So probably by contrast to some platforms that are only screening films, e-flux, not only in terms of film, but in terms of art and all the other forms of art, always wanted to maintain the critical discourse around it. And that's how I think also documentary cinema could become even more interesting to the contemporary art world. So yeah, probably that's what I wanted to share here, and I hope we will have some discussions later on. Thank you.
That's great, much, Lukas. I think it's really interesting angle to be trying to kind of bring the contemporary art and the film world together. And may I say, long overdue. I think I should have also mentioned that Lukas is coming to us from Shanghai, so just impressive dedication being here at 1 o'clock in the morning. So thank you. Great. So yeah, we'll move on to Christopher now from Doc Alliance.
I'm Christopher Small. I'm a British curator and critic and filmmaker. I actually am one of the programmers of Sheffield DocFest, but unfortunately I'm not in Sheffield now because I'm based in Prague, and restrictions, vaccinations, and so on have kept me here. But the other thing I do, other than Sheffield, the main bulk of my time, is working for Doc Alliance, which is the festival association of 7 documentary festivals in Europe. So we built a Vihlava, Fid Marseille, Doc Leipzig, Docs Against Gravity, Doc Lisboa in Portugal, Visions do Riel, and CPH Docs. And around 15 years ago, these festivals got together and they made an online platform. This was the same year as YouTube. So this platform was kind of small to start with, and over time it started to build and build and build. And in the last few years, it became something quite big, particularly here in Eastern Europe. And as it was growing in these last few years, we started to adapt the way that we show films. So the one path that this went through was DA Films, DA Films started to show more films just from the festivals. This was originally the intention, that the catalog of DA Films would be built mostly out of these films. Then it became more of a curatorial platform, which is where I come in because I'm one of the curators and I'm the head of acquisitions. And then, fortuitously, or however you want to see it, just before the start of the pandemic, we started to expand massively. And this was almost perfectly timed with the pandemic, actually. We launched a platform in the Americas, which I also curate, and later platform in Asia, and in Eastern Europe, also a new platform in Slovakia and one in Poland. So we are like working with many languages and many different kinds of national cinemas and different audiences. And what else to say? We basically, our programming is built up of we have these kind of curated selections that we work with on a regular basis. They typically used to be more thematic based, working with the existing catalog, but this last year it's kind of shifted a little, and now they tend to be larger. For example, at the start of the year, we did this elaborate series called Housing Project, which was built up of films about housing from various different national cinemas. And we do many director retrospectives, which also is a way to respond to these different audiences around the world. So just to take an example, I'm particularly focused on Latin America at the minute. So we just did the first complete online retrospective of Ignacio Oguero, the Chilean filmmaker, showing many of his films for the first time in HD. And actually, very recently, this past week, we collaborated again with Sheffield, where we showed the films of Paulo Gaetan, the Brazilian filmmaker who has a new film at Sheffield and who's on the international jury. And so we showed 4 of all his films for free for a week. And from Monday, we will show him the latest film, River Rock, which just a couple of days ago had its premiere at Sheffield. So we have this background in festivals that's directly linked to the Doc Alliance, but every month we are bringing new festivals into the family. We've just, today, actually this morning, I put online a festival focus with Diagonale in Austria, which is a very, very interesting kind of experimental festival. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a festival focus with Taiwan International Documentary Festival, which is super interesting. A month ago with Jeonju, and starting on Monday also Sheffield, curated by yours truly. But that's kind of the overview of what we're doing, and we're very much a filmmaker-oriented platform. So perhaps for the filmmakers who are listening, we can actually get into that a bit more later, and I won't just keep explaining everything now.
That's great, thanks so much. And yeah, we will talk a little bit more about how filmmakers can interact with you. But yeah, Róisín, do you want to tell us a bit about Shasha?
Sure. Thank you, Delphi, and everyone else. It was really interesting listening to your about your platforms. So I run Shasha. Shasha is Arabic for screen. I am a Syrian Iraqi, grew up mainly in Ireland, now I'm in London. So Shasha came from this project I run called Habibi Collective. And so Habibi Collective is a digital archive, open access resource, curatorial platform for women's filmmaking from Southwest Asia, North Africa, also known as Middle East, North Africa. And Habibi Collective is very grassroots, and I still do like lots of screenings mainly in real life, independently. So like this curating screenings now in Baghdad, Kosovo, and also in kind of major institutions. We just did one with MoMA. So really across the board, but always working with women from that region. So Shasha started because with COVID, everything got moved online, like all of the film programs that I was working on, and as well also festivals. I founded the Iraq's first independent film festival last year. So it was really just kind of, yeah, it made sense to sort of start, I guess, it's thinking about a streaming service. And because of the nature of the films that I am dealing with, it actually meant that one, like I can only be in so many places at one time. So it's pretty much, it was just me running Habibi Collective for years. Now I have some people and some friends, some some great people. So I mean, online screening means we reach more people, and also it means that we can screen films that we necessarily weren't able to screen in real life. So I directed a queer film festival, which we couldn't do in real life, and also the Iraq Film Festival couldn't happen in real life, both for political reasons. So it's a really good outlet for that. So Shasha is an SVOD platform, so subscription. Yeah, so you pay a subscription and you can watch all of the films. And there are 20 different films per month. They're very carefully curated, and they respond to a sort of different theme or discourse from the region. And I should also mention Shasha is not just for women. Shasha is basically just anyone from the region or the diaspora. And so for our first month in March, we did actually the first month in March there wasn't really any theme. It was just kind of filmmakers who and distributors who were friends who would let me have their films for free. And they were all really good films. And then the next month was a focus on Yemen's new wave. Because I was recently on the jury for Yemen's film festival, and there's a really interesting new wave of cinema coming out of Yemen that no one is screening. So we collaborated with Komra Films and a few other kind of small production companies there. And then this month is women's liberation docs, kind of guerrilla liberation docs from the 70s till now. Next month is going to be a collaboration with Nowness, the video platform on cultural heritage. And then we have a few other collaborations coming up with Black Star, which is an amazing festival in Philly, and a few other organizations. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of kind of politics behind Shasha. For one, the service is made from scratch, and this is something that was really important to me because I found it very paradoxical how, especially in reaction to Black Lives Matter last year, a lot of institutions started screening these incredibly political films using Silicon Valley tech services. And I just thought that offline, there's so much discourse around the politics of space. So why were we not having these conversations within digital infrastructures? So it was really important to build the whole thing from scratch. And we really operate on like pretty much like an absolute almost non-existent budget. So it was fun. We did a crowd fundraiser, which raised £5,000 in like 2 weeks. And GoFundMe took a large chunk of that, and that mainly went towards making the tech. And yeah, it's literally just a senior web developer. We're all women from the region in the team. So a senior web developer, her assistant, myself, and 2 programmers who I've trained. And that is kind of it. And we have other people coming in and out. I do pretty much all the marketing, and we do the translation together, and all the films are in original language. with English subtitles. And all of the films, like, we don't do any geo-blocking. So you can watch the films anywhere in the world, and that was incredibly important for us because the problem of films from the region is that they are rarely watched by people from the region. They always get confined to European festival circuits. The films focus on so yeah, we have a different program each month, but we really use we use narrative feature lengths. We use moving image. Like, there's really kind of there's no kind of, I guess, singular focus in terms of formatting, and that's probably just because I work between the film and the art industries, and I mainly curate moving image and video and essay film, and I am a writer at Freeze, so I am kind of in the film industry. The art industry more than I would say I'm in the film industry. And I think they fit nicely together. So yeah, we don't kind of discriminate based on what kind of the film you have. And I'm thinking if there is anything else really important to say. I didn't even make notes. Yeah, DRM protections in place, and it's a good way to discover new films. If you're not familiar with the region, and I think our viewership is interesting because, yeah, we launched in March and we have, I think, now over like nearly 700 subscribers, and it's not necessarily people from the region. It is people who, well, I guess the people from the region are the people who are happy that they're seeing themselves represented for the first time, because it is the first independent streaming platform for Swana Cinema. Like, there is no other one that exists. And so Swana, it's not just Arab, it also includes Farsi, Iranian, Kurdish, Turkish, Armenian, the list goes on. And yeah, and people kind of who work in the art industry in Europe who are just kind of like to have their niche interests. So that is Shasha in a nutshell, and you can access it via shashamovies.com. And I'll talk very briefly about, like, I'm super open to accepting submissions. We have a submissions email called submissions@shashamovies.com. And yeah, I'm kind of friends with most of the filmmakers that we work with. Like, we're super accessible, and we just add screeners we receive to a database, and we watch them, and we get in contact if it fits the program. Thank you.
That's really great, and Róisín has taken me on to my next question as well, so thank you so much. Don't even need a moderator. Apologies if I've distracted anyone with my lighting difficulties. You can now see the part of my office you weren't meant to see. But anyway, yeah, if the other panelists could let me know what's the best way for filmmakers to present their work to you?
I have a similar email, submissions@TrueStory.Film, so filmmakers can just get in touch. Certainly the initial jumping off point in terms of kind of putting together our launch program was kind of festivals that I'd been to in person, perhaps the year before launch. But I've certainly found sort of attending online festivals in the last year quite challenging for all sorts of reasons, childcare in particular. I kind of tend to sort of, research the festivals after they've happened and get in touch with the filmmakers of the films that I'm interested in and get links that way. So, yeah, I might get in touch with you, but you can get in touch with me. So.
That's great, thanks. Yeah, go on, Lukas.
In our case, again, I probably similarly to Chris, to some extent, there are like some curated programs which the curators, either us or guest curators, select films. But specifically in terms of premiering your film on e-flux video and film, we're pretty open, and definitely you should, either the artist or the production company or the distributor or producer contact us, and Yes, like usually it's also there is no geo-blocking. The films are really very widely accessible. And we have a certain, it's up to debate at this point, but we would probably try to find some kind of mutual agreement about the price for this announcement of a premiere of a film, because that's how e-flux survives, and specifically in this case, we think that both sides would benefit. It's very different in curated programs, because that's on the curator, but we'll always pay also artist fees to the participating artists, because that's what the ethics of e-flux are. So yeah, like shortly, please email us if you have an idea and want to premiere your film. Please email us either info@eflux.com or lucas@eflux.com.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I could say like we have a submissions process, which is very simple. It's just to send us the link. At the minute, we are curating a lot of films, and these films generally come from our curation and from our own searches, because essentially we are assembling these programs based on extensive research and from festivals and so on. What we try and do at Films is to keep the submissions process as open and as transparent as possible. But of course, since we receive many submissions, it's a slow process. But this year, I mean, I can say that one of our major retrospectives came very fortuitously through submissions. Actually, it was the first major retrospective we did all year, and the filmmaker wrote just suggesting one film, and we took 10. So this actually was a very beautiful experience with the submissions. But often it works on the basis of one film or two films to make just small programs here and there, because such was the really crazy expansion of the last year that we're just over our capacities with these things. So it's open, transparent. You would probably just get a response directly from me, but it's a slow, hulking process at the moment, with hopefully a carrot at the end.
That's great. And it leads on quite nicely to my next question. This is the last question I'll ask before we open up to audience questions. So if anyone's got questions to share that they haven't put in the chat box as yet, please do. But yeah, my next question for all of our panelists. What are some of the challenges of running your platform, and what can people do to support you?
I could maybe go first.
Yeah, sure.
What's going on with us right now is that we have so many different audiences we're addressing. Like we actually do geo-block because it's part of many of the license agreements that we strike with filmmakers, and it allows us to work in specific areas. So, for example, what goes on at the films here in Czechia, in Czech Republic, is quite different and quite specific, because our licenses then would be for films to show in the Czech Republic. So actually, DA Films in the Czech Republic looks like a quote-unquote normal VOD platform. It shows some more mainstream films, some more mainstream documentaries, as well as the kind of independent auteur-driven documentaries that are our backbone. Then for international, we have to. It's more complicated, basically. And so with this is our constant challenge: is to try and address these different audiences in a way that doesn't always sound British and doesn't always sound Czech. And this actually is difficult because, in Latin America, I'm still communicating, writing press releases, social media, and so on in Spanish. But also, like, it's inevitable that English, for example, in Southeast Asia, is the lingua franca that we have to work with just by necessity, because it's such a huge geographic region, even if we were to focus on individual countries. So this is kind of what we are adapting to, and it's a slow process, but I think it's really a beautiful one. And when we do, for example, something we've been doing recently to really reach audiences is to do live conversations under the banner Da Films Conversations. And when we do them in Spanish, and the feedback is so much more immediate and so much more passionate, maybe, let's say, because it's from kind of a local audience, it really is. It really warms my heart and makes me feel like these films are actually being seen and being shared as much as possible. But I didn't answer the second part of your question, so I could just super quickly just say that really what we are looking for is for people to see the films, and the way that we structure our financial arrangements, because we're not Netflix and we're not Mubi, so what we can kind of let's say boast is that all of our license agreements are very, very heavily tilted in favor of the filmmakers. So filmmakers receive a very large percentage of everything that is earned on their films, and the emphasis is always on the filmmakers. It's always on putting conversations with the filmmakers, always on trying to find the right contexts that filmmakers are happy with. So for us, really, the fact that people are watching the films and sharing them and interacting on social media and online is really where we get our energy from, especially in COVID.
That's really great. Does anyone else want to speak to that kind of challenges that they've encountered?
Yeah, I sort of, although I've worked in cinema programming for many years, I feel like with starting an online platform is literally you're literally just sort of learning everything from scratch. So it's kind of starting anew, really. So yeah, everything is a challenge in that respect. But certainly, I can certainly sort of see the similarities in terms of it's probably easy to think that you have this amazing film and anyone in the world can watch it and therefore you're going to instantly hit huge audiences, and that isn't necessarily the case. I think the sort of I've always felt, certainly on the cinema programming side of things, that the documentary audience is hard won, and getting the word out there and reaching your audience is such a huge part of the work. And I've sort of taken the route of quite a lot of the films that I have maybe don't have, so quite often they don't have so many sort of reviews necessarily that people would have found out about the films, unless you're perhaps somebody that's on the festival circuit already or in the industry or whatever. So I've taken the approach of trying to kind of build a contact list of press in all the different territories that we're in, and just trying to get reviews for some of the kind of the key films that we're adding on a weekly basis, which I guess ties in a little bit perhaps with the sort of the more traditional theatrical way that films are released, in a way. It's certainly small numbers at the moment, but I'm definitely noticing that those films that we are getting the reviews for, we've been lucky enough to get reviews in publications like The Guardian, and we've had a couple in the Boston Globe and the Financial Times. That those films that we managed to get the most coverage for are the ones that are perhaps bringing audiences to us. So we'll keep doing that, but I think my experience from cinema is very much that the kind of the outreach side of things is really key, and I'm certainly keen at some point, when I have the capacity to do it, to add Q&As. I think Q&A, I guess with any filmmaker, but I always find with documentary filmmaking in particular that the audiences love to the opportunity to respond and ask the filmmaker questions afterwards. So that's something that I want to do, and also just sort of kind of doing more that more outreach work rather than perhaps traditional marketing is something that I started a lot more as well. So yeah, I think just sort of getting out there and reaching the audience is the hard thing. The thing I need help with, I guess I want anyone that subscribes and likes what we're doing, let people know. I mean, it's kind of the platform has to kind of be self-sustaining, really. So we just sort of want to reach as I think all of these films are amazing, and I think there's a lot of people out there who perhaps don't know about all of these films either. And I think we're just sort of trying to reach as broad an audience as possible with all of these incredible films. So
great. We're going to move on to the audience questions now, because we're kind of in the last 10 minutes. So I'll ask the first question that we got, which was from someone called Martin. And he said he wondered which platforms would be best for sports-based documentaries, for example, stories from behind the scenes in wrestling. So I don't know if any of you guys have experience with sports documentaries, or do you feel like they could fit into kind of numerous platforms that look at things more broadly? Does anyone have any thoughts on that question?
I have. I love a sports doc. I have a few, not many. I do particularly like wrestling films as well, actually, although I don't have any particular interest in wrestling. So, send it in, and I'd certainly love to take a look. Admissions@TrueStory.Film was the email address.
Great. I think, sports docs having a bit of a moment. They're always quite a sort of wide appeal, because I'm not massively into sports, but I enjoy watching sports docs as well. So, and then another question that's come in, that I think kind of it speaks quite well to what you were saying about Q&As, Chris. And they have referenced Róisín, and they were saying Róisín mentioned doing live events as well. Do you have plans to mix the online program with offline events in the future? And likewise, do the other panelists have these ideas or aspirations as well?
Well, I mean, with Shasha, it's pretty much just online. But Habibi Collective, I mean, they're kind of like one and the same, really. Habibi Collective is just real life screenings, and because community is at the core of what we do, obviously, our films are very much by and for a particular community. Real life screenings are so important. And there's a few coming up that I briefly mentioned. I'm doing one in a few weeks it hasn't been announced yet, but at Chisenhale Gallery in London, and that's a fundraiser for Anne-Marie Jasser and Emily Jasser, two really good friends of mine who unfortunately their cultural hub in Palestine was destroyed a few weeks ago. So that's it's kind of all screenings are I guess tied to a certain purpose or to the space in which I'm invited if I find a particular invite interesting. And I think just online screenings, because there's nothing like watching a film with a group of people. And something that always used to make me laugh at the beginning when I started programming years ago was I'd be like, I don't know, doing a screening on Lebanese kind of socialist women cinema, and all these people would come who were all people of color, and then the galleries would be like, we don't usually get people like this in our gallery, and I just feel like, well, like, no shit, decolonize your programs. So I think that it's really important to collaborate with not to kind of be able to collaborate with institutions on your own terms, and also very much operate within grassroots spaces. I think both have their benefits. And yeah.
That's great. Thanks.
We do some screenings here in Prague, actually, and over the next couple of months over the summer, we are collaborating with a new cinema here in Prague to show some of the films from our catalog in kind of different ways, because we really, the backbone of our whole festival association is festivals. So it's something really that we can't escape. It's something that we really love. And also the fact that this last year I was also programming, like putting together the main Sheffield program with my 5 colleagues. So it was always in my mind this kind of mix, and some of what we've done also. For example, we did this Paula Gaetan, which the new film will show in Sheffield, or has shown in Sheffield. Then we'll come to Da Films. We also did a retrospective of Viera Hitilova, which also had some roots in the UK, also with Second Run and with Sheffield and with some other institutions. So I mean, it's something we're doing already, and once the restrictions lift and life hopefully gets a little more color again, it's really it's really where we belong. Even though we're a VOD platform, it really is our roots.
Absolutely, that's great. We've had another question. It's quite broad, but maybe someone will have thoughts on it, and says, could you speak to the subject of censorship?
That's a huge problem for me with the films that I work with. It's kind of the reason why we operate 100% independently and don't have any sponsorships or kind of long-term investors or partnerships is because of the politics of the films that we're showing. And even with funding, if we apply for funding in the region, we have to be very careful about who we're getting funding from. And usually, films will have censored versions. Like I was screening the premiere of a film just in that brief period in the UK when lockdown was open at the beginning of lockdown lifted at the beginning of last year at the Curzon, and it was there was pretty much a new version of the film, which was like for the English audiences. So yeah, and there's also the case of geo-blocking, which I would honestly say is a particular form of censorship if you are dealing with because in our case, I mean, it's so important politically, it's so important that there is no geo-blocking, because films then get confined to certain spaces in which the viewers are not the kind of community in which the film actually speaks to. So for example, at the MoMA screenings, I made it clear that I'd only work with them if it wasn't just North American people, and if there was no fee to watch the films. So I guess just kind of navigating that as well. Actually in the region, in like the Swana region, geo-blocking is kind of used, not to name names, but there was a particular Abu Dhabi distribution company, and they geo-blocked Qatar because there's problems with those two kind of places, and it's all of this mess. So yeah, I think political censorship definitely is not just censorship. It's not just trying to free censorship in terms of the content of the films, but it's the kind of pedagogy of curating and programming these films in this particular geography.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
That's really interesting insight. Thank you. We're gonna have to wrap up now because we're pretty much out of time. So sorry if I've cut any of you off, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for kind of sharing their platforms with us and telling us what they're about. Hopefully it was really useful, interesting, inspiring to those of you watching. So yeah, please do check out True Story, Doc Alliance, Shasha, e-flux, and as I mentioned at the start, there's a whole host of these different platforms, Tank as well, Another Screen, the Criterion channel, and there's lots of them online, so do kind of have a look and kind of broaden your horizons a bit. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a good evening.